Lesson 39, Review. Caesar, Book 1, Chapter 2, Begun. Hi everybody, welcome back to Lenny's Latin class. Today we're in Lesson 39, which is on page 118. And this is a review lesson. So all the material here, well, most of it at least, is from past exercises and past lessons. Usually these review lessons are taken exactly from previous lessons. So there's really no need for me to go over all this stuff again. This is a recorded lecture series. So if you want to review the material, you can simply go back to a previous lecture and listen to it again. So I will not be doing 317, 318, or 319. The thing we really need to focus on here is what is new to us, and that is a new chunk of Caesar's Gallic Wars. So let's talk about section 320 and 321. In section 320, it gives a bit of history, which will give you some good context for understanding the story, what's happening in the text that we're going to read. Let's just read it together. It says, during the year 58 BC, Caesar conducted two campaigns, one against a Gallic tribe, the Helvetii, another against Ariovistus, a German king. The account of the Helvetian campaign, chapters 2 to 29 of the first book of the commentaries, is given in this book. Scholars are not sure exactly how the text of Caesar's Gallic Wars made it back to Rome. It could have been done in such a way where it was sent at the end of each year as kind of a yearly update or yearly report. It could have been something that Caesar wrote up to send to the Senate to account for his actions. One thing that they definitely do think is that when Caesar would send these back to Rome, it would get people talking about him, and it made him kind of a sort of a celebrity, sort of a hero, someone who's out there doing adventures and building the Roman Empire. So it definitely built his clout or his reputation back at Rome, and not everyone liked that. Some people didn't want him to be that powerful. So during this time, campaigning in Gaul, Caesar developed both friends and enemies. There are 8 books total to Caesar's Gallic Wars, the first 7 of which Caesar wrote himself, and then the final one, Book 8, was written by an associate of his named Aulus Hirtius. So we have 8 books of Caesar's Gallic Wars. In the ancient world, that means that it would have taken up 8 scrolls. So we have 8 books, one for each year, and the one we're studying in this particular book, this textbook known as the First Year of Latin, is Book 1. And as we just read in section 320, Book 1 is from his very first year on campaign in Gaul in the year 58 BC. The first campaign is when the Helvetii ask to cut through Roman territory. They cook up a scheme to abandon their homeland and move to greener pastures. And so they ask permission to cut through Roman territory. And Caesar says no. And so a big battle ensues. The next thing that happens is a conflict with a guy named Ariovistus. And very briefly, here's the story. One Gallic tribe was fighting another Gallic tribe. And the first Gallic tribe asked some German mercenaries to come and help them. So they invited Ariovistus, a German, warlord, to come into Gaul and help them fight their enemies. But once Ariovistus arrived in Gaul, he thought, hey, this place is pretty nice. And he basically just took over. So the plan didn't go like the Gallic tribes wanted it to. It ended up backfiring on them. So, long story short, Caesar notices that Ariovistus has taken over this area of Gaul. He doesn't like it, and he tells Ariovistus to get out of there, and Ariovistus refuses. They have a big meeting, they meet face to face, and it doesn't go very well. And then basically, the Romans under Caesar end up getting into a huge battle with Ariovistus and his troops. And you can read all about that in Book 1 of Caesar's Gallic Wars. back to where we are reading in Caesar's Gallic Wars, in section 321, we are still reading about the conflict with the Helvetii. Again, they cook up a scheme to burn their towns, to burn all their resources, and make their way out of Switzerland to some new place. They ask Caesar permission to cut through some Roman territory. He says no. They do it anyway, and so there's an enormous military conflict. And it all starts with a guy named Orgetorix. And that's what we're going to read about in today's reading of Caesar's Gallic Wars. So let's start here in section 321, and let's examine the Latin text here. A lot of this is going to look familiar because we've seen bits and pieces of this in the exercises, so hopefully it won't be too hard to read. Let's take a look at the first sentence. It says, Apud Helvetios longe nobilissimus fuit et ditissimus Orgetorix. Again, this shouldn't be too hard because we've seen exercises just like this. The subject here is, well, we really have two subjects, nobilissimus and ditissimus. Those are superlative adjectives that are being used as substantives. Nobilissimus means the most noble guy, and ditissimus means the richest guy. The verb here is fuit. That means he, she, or it was. And then Orgetorix is a predicate nominative. So the basic structure here is the noblest person and the richest person was Orgetorix. Not too difficult. Apud Helvetios is a prepositional phrase that means among the Helvetii. Apud takes the accusative case. Finally, we have the adverb longe, which means by far. It's operating here in a similar fashion to an ablative of degree of difference, except really it's an adverb. So the first sentence says this, among the Helvetii, by far the most noble and the richest person was Orgetorix. Let's move on to the next sentence. Is im Messala et im Pisone consulibus regni cupiditate inductus coniurationem nobilitatis fecit. Let's just stop there for now. In this area of the sentence that we're working with now, the subject is is, and the verb is fecit. Is a form of is ea id, which can mean he, she, it, or this or that, or just the. It can mean lots of things. In this particular case, it means he, because it's obviously referring to Orgetorix. The verb here is fecit. That's a form of facio, which means to do or make, and it's perfect tense, third person singular. So is and fecit together will say he did or he made. The direct object of fecit is coniurationem, which means conspiracy. So he made a conspiracy, and then nobilitatis is genitive singular. That means of the nobility or of the aristocracy. And so what that means is land-owning, wealthy, upper-class people of his Gallic tribe. Remember, in these ancient societies, they had class by birth, oftentimes. So you could be born into a high-ranking family or born into a low-ranking family. Typically, the families of high social rank were wealthy, they owned land, and had lots of people under them, working for them and depending on them. So Orgetorix gets together with other men of high social rank, of aristocratic social rank, and he cooks up a conspiracy. Okay, so is fecit and coniurationem says he made a conspiracy, and then along with nobilitatis, it says of the nobility. We have a perfect passive participle modifying is, and that's the word inductus. That can mean induced or influenced, things like that. And then we have an ablative of means here, that's cupiditate. Cupiditas is a third declension noun that means desire. Here it's ablative singular because it's an ablative of means. He was influenced by desire or induced by desire. And cupiditate is working along with the noun regni. That's the second declension neuter noun regnum, which means kingdom or kingship. Here I would translate it as kingship. So regni, cupiditate, and inductus together form a little group that says induced by the desire of kingship. Orgetrix wants to do a power grab. He wants to be king of his tribe. So what we have so far says this: he, induced by the desire of kingship, made a conspiracy of the nobility. Another way to think of regni here is as an objective genitive. It's objective in the sense that it's the target of what Orgetrix is desiring. He's induced by the desire of kingship in the sense of it's a desire for kingship. He desires the kingship. So in that sense, the kingship is the direct object of cupiditate. So since it has that kind of feeling of being the object of the desire, we call genitives like regni, we call that an objective genitive because it has the quality of being a direct object of something. So that's a good term to know, the objective genitive. Finally, in this section, we have a big ablative absolute consisting of some names and then the word consulibus. And this is a way that the ancient Romans would designate what year they're talking about, is they would say who was consul during that year. In ancient Rome, during the Republic, and also during the Empire, there would be 2 consuls each year, sort of like 2 presidents, 2 heads of state who ruled as a pair, and this office would be elected each year. So each year you would have 2 people as consul, and so you can use an ablative absolute to say who was consul at a certain time. Messala is ablative singular, Pisone is ablative singular, consulibus is ablative plural. It's all an ablative absolute. And as footnote number 2 says, the M's here stand for Marcus. You know, there really weren't very many names for men in ancient Rome. Just a few, really, such as Marcus, Gaius, things like that. And so you see abbreviations a lot for some of these very common Roman names. So we'll translate this ablative absolute here like this. With Marcus Messala and Marcus Piso as consuls, or we could say during the consulship of Marcus Messala and Marcus Piso. So the part of the sentence we're working on now reads like this. He, during the consulship of Marcus Messala and Marcus Piso, induced by the desire of kingship, made a conspiracy of the nobility. Let's go on now to the next part of the sentence. We'll take the word et through the word exierent. Et civitati persuasit ut de finibus suis cum omnibus copiis exierent. The subject here is still understood to be the word is, which is he, referring to Orgetrix. And the verb here is persuasit. That's a form of the verb persuadeo, which means to persuade. So we'll translate persuasit as he persuaded. Persuasit is perfect tense, third person singular. Remember that persuadeo takes the dative case. So if you want to figure out who is being persuaded of something, you have to find a noun in the dative case. And lo and behold, civitati is here. That's dative singular of the third declension noun civitas, which means state. So civitati as a dative singular and persuasit together say he persuaded the state, meaning his Gallic tribe, the government of the tribe. And then we have the word ut. We'll translate ut as that, and now we'll find out what exactly he was persuading them to do. So civitati, persuasit, and ut, along with the word et, together we'll say, and he persuaded the state that, And the rest of the sentence tells us what he was trying to persuade them to do. Notice that this clause here is in secondary sequence. Persuasit is in a past tense, which means it's secondary sequence, and so exirent is imperfect subjunctive. So we are in secondary sequence here as far as the sequence of tenses goes. The footnote here tells us that exirent is a form of the verb exeo. The verb eo, just consisting of e and o, means to go, and then ex means out of, right? So if you put ex and eo together, it means to go out. Exirent is, again, imperfect subjunctive, third person plural. So what we have so far would say, and he persuaded the state that they go out. In more colloquial English, we might say, he persuaded the state to go out. Of course, translating it that way is not literal, but it's smoother English. De finibus suis is a prepositional phrase. De here means from, and finibus means borders, and suis means their own. So he's persuading them that they go out from their own borders. Of course, when finis is plural, you can translate it with the collective term territory. So the idea here is that he persuaded them to go out from their own territory. Finally, we have another prepositional phrase, cum omnibus copiis. Copiis is a form of copia, which is a first declension noun that can mean different things. It can mean supplies. It can mean troops. Here it looks like it means supplies. Cum takes the ablative, so copiis is ablative plural. And it's being modified by omnibus. That's the ablative plural form of omnis, which means all. So cum omnibus copiis says, with all supplies. And the idea is that it's their supplies. So the word their is understood. You could throw in the word their, T-H-E-I-R, into your translation. So this section of the sentence says this, and he persuaded the state that they go out from their own territory with all their supplies. Moving on, we have per facile esse, cum virtute omnibus praestarent, totius Galliae imperio potiri. We have lots and lots of footnotes here, so let's jump in and figure out what's going on here. Here you have an example of a writer who suddenly just shifts into indirect speech. Notice that esse here is an infinitive, and potiri is an infinitive. So we have infinitive verbs here. Caesar has just sort of flipped a switch and gone into indirect speech. And so what we have to do here is we have to imagine some kind of verb of saying or some kind of verb of persuading, okay? On the previous line, in fact, we have persuasit, and that's really, in Latin texts, that's enough to trigger indirect speech. So he persuaded them that they ought to do this, they ought to do that, and now we're just slipping into indirect speech. So before the word per facile, imagine some kind of word that's saying he said or he argued, something like that. Really, persuasit is what is happening here. He's persuading them that per facile esse. Okay, the word per facile means very easy. Facile on its own means easy. And when you have an adjective that's prefixed with the word per, the prefix per, it strengthens it or emphasizes it. So facile means easy. Per facile means very easy. And the idea with esse here is that it's just saying it was. It's like the word est in regular speech, but when you convert it to indirect speech, it becomes an infinitive. So as the footnote says, footnote number 4, they suggest that you consider the word dixit there. He said, and then reported speech or indirect speech, it was very easy. In colloquial English, we might say, he said that it would be very easy, something like that. But literally what it's saying here is he said that it was easy. So literally what he's saying here is he said that it was very easy. Of course, if you want to persuade someone to do something, you don't tell them that it's really hard. You say it's easy because you want to convince them or persuade them, right? Let's skip over the middle part of the sentence and go to the word totius. Totius Gallii imperio potiri. Potiri here is an infinitive working from per facile. Orgetrix is saying that it was easy to take possession of, or as the footnote says, easy to secure. Okay, this special verb here, potiri, is a verb called potior. Okay, P-O-T-I-O-R, potior. It's a deponent verb, meaning that it looks passive, but you translate it in an active kind of way. Another special characteristic of potior is that it's one of a very small group of verbs that takes the ablative case. Another common verb like that is utor, which means to use. So utor and potior are examples of deponent verbs that take the ablative case. So potiri is a present tense infinitive. It looks passive, but because it's a deponent verb, we will translate it actively. So Orgetrix said it was very easy. Then we go to potiri, to secure, and now potiri is going to take the ablative. That's imperio, which is ablative singular. That's the second declension neuter noun imperium, which means command. So what we have so far would say, he said it was very easy to secure the command. Next we have totius and Gallii. Totius and Gallii are both genitive singular, working along with imperio. So it's the command of all of Gaul. Totius means all, Gallii means Gaul. Notice that totius has the letter I there in the genitive singular ending. It's one of the naughty 9 adjectives that has that letter I there. So keep your eye out for that, no pun intended. So what we have so far says, he said it was very easy to secure the command of all Gaul. Now let's look at the middle part that says, cum virtute omnibus praestarent. So this clause here in the middle of this sentence is a cum clause. And so we need to figure out how to translate cum here. And so now is actually not a bad time to review cum clauses in general. There's one kind that takes an indicative verb and 3 kinds that take a subjunctive verb, for a total of 4 different kinds. Okay, so a cum temporal clause, that's the kind that takes an indicative verb. And it's called temporal because all it does is tells you the timing of something. It tells you when something happened, and so you translate cum as when. Now the other 3 kinds that take a subjunctive verb, those are circumstantial, causal, and concessive. And again, these take a subjunctive verb. If you want a quick way to remember these kinds, you can say this: under the circumstances, since, or although. Those are the 3 meanings you can have here. Some Latin teachers like to say when, since, or although. Those are the 3 ways that you can translate it if cum takes a subjunctive verb. In fact, my high school Latin teacher used to say when, since, or although. But it's really better, instead of the first one saying when, it's really better to say under the circumstances, because when you say under the circumstances, it helps to provide more of a clear snapshot of how the grammar is working. Okay, so cum plus an indicative verb, that's temporal. It just tells you time. Cum plus a subjunctive verb, that's under the circumstances, since, or although. If you translate cum as since, it kind of means the same thing as if you were saying because. So that kind of clause is called a causal clause, or a causal cum clause. If you translate it as although, we call that a concessive clause because you're conceding something. You're saying, although such and such happened, blah, blah, blah happened. Okay, so cum circumstantial is when you say, under the circumstances. Cum causal is when you translate it as since. And then cum concessive is when you translate it as although. Here, in this particular case, we have cum plus praestarent. And what cum is doing here is it's telling us the reason why it would be easy to take possession of Gaul. And so we'll translate cum as since or because. And so that's a cum causal clause. Why would it be so easy to take over Gaul? Well, since praestarent. Praestarent means to excel. Okay, so cum and praestarent will say, since they excel or surpass. And this is a special verb. It's called dative with compound verbs. As you can see from footnote 7, this verb is going to take the dative case. So praestarent says that someone is excelling or surpassing someone. And so the people that are being surpassed are in the dative case. So omnibus is dative plural. Praestarent and omnibus together will say they excel or they surpass everybody. And then we have the ablative of respect here, virtute. That's showing you the area in which they excel everyone or surpass everyone. If you're a student, at first glance, cum and virtute might appear to you as a prepositional phrase. You might think to yourself, oh, I see the word cum, which is a preposition that takes the ablative, and then virtute is ablative singular. So cum and virtute means with virtue, right? It's a prepositional phrase. It looks that way, but that's not the structure of the sentence. The word cum here is operating as a conjunction, not as a preposition, because this is a cum clause. So cum up through the word praestarent will say this: since they surpass everyone with respect to valor, or you could say in valor, that's probably a better way to do it. And in fact, we can translate praestarent as surpassed, not surpass, to make it more consistent with the other past tense verbs here in our English translation. So this last section as a whole will say this: he said that it was very easy to secure the command of all Gaul, since they surpassed everyone in valor. Okay, that does it for this installment of Lenny's Latin class. Thank you for listening. There was a lot of complicated grammar in that particular reading. So thanks for your hard work. Thanks for sticking with me through all that. And we'll see you next time in the next installment of Lenny's Latin class.